the NBA season has come and gone, and you know, I feel like this season was really one of them where the NBA sucks narrative was really loud, and I couldn't find a better think of a better um, season to really combat that than what we just watched. Over a 9-month period, I thought we watched some of the best basketball that we've ever seen. Um, there were some high points. There was some excitement. There were some legacies created. There were some low points, some heartbreaks. So those came last night. I think overall, though, we will look back on this season and, we'll talk a little bit about Game 7. Um, but we'll look back on this season, and I think it's kind of a bridge. New superstars are emerging, new teams are starting to emerge. It's kind of a closing ceremony for a lot of the old stars that we grew up with, and the coronation for the future of the game. Um, and I think we saw a lot of that this season. We're going to get into that a little bit today. We're going to talk about Game 7 from last night. We're going to talk about maybe someone that's in the middle of his closing ceremony, and Kevin Durant, who was traded to the Houston Rockets. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the future of, well, I guess the NBA, the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference. A lot of things got shaken up in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. We're going to discuss all that, but first, some Big X the plug.
Fantasy move for a 5-0 team right
That's right. I'm staying on top of it.
God, I hope Ray doesn't win. Adam Thielen's had a great year.
Put it here this time, hopefully. We tried to do it last time.
Now recording on my phone.
Sound commented on our Instagram post.
Do this to yourself.
But it's off the tracks. You know how it goes. It's gonna be a fun one tonight.
It's off the tracks. It's Jet. It's Rafe. We're back. We closed out Sunday's video saying, one of us is going to be happy and the other is going to be extremely sad. And, when I said that, I could have never imagined, I could imagine the happiness that one side felt, but I could have never imagined the sadness that has been these last 24 hours. I hate to damper the mood here, Rafe, because I can't imagine what this has been like for you. But I mean, just give me a little insight on that. How are you feeling today?
I thought a lot about what I wanted to say on here. Not that it really matters what I have to say about all of this, but it's really hard to describe. I don't want to gloat too much here tonight, but it genuinely is probably the best feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. I never thought I would ever be able to experience this ever, and I'm very happy I was able to. We can go on and on about Oklahoma City and, who they were, what they were this year, how good they were, and the historic aspects of that. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that too. But yeah, I don't know how I was supposed to sleep last night. I didn't really. Yeah, it's the coolest thing ever, dude. I don't know. I hope you get to genuinely. I hope you get to experience this. I honestly do, because it's awesome. And anybody that hasn't experienced one of their favorite teams winning a championship, it's pretty freaking cool. But I do want to say before we move on, I'm glad you started off the video like that, because I do think it's a really exciting time for basketball. NBC and Amazon have rights to the NBA now. We'll get to see how their coverages are next year, which I'm very excited about. There's a lot of good names that they've brought on to be analysts and hosts and everything. Possible expansion. They're talking maybe even meetings about that this off season. So another, big exciting change possibly coming to the league. The stars that we can talk about all night too, that have kind of anointed themselves throughout these playoffs, specifically the NBA Finals. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff happening in basketball right now, and it's a great time to be a fan.
Well,
sorry. Yes. For some. Yes. Sorry.
It is a great time to be a basketball fan. I don't, I don't know where to start with this, and I've really thought about it all day. Of where do we start with this podcast? Because I literally said a couple of videos back after Game 6, I hate starting out with the losing team because it's lame, it's stupid, but I know you don't really necessarily see it the way that I see it, and maybe the way that even the other 28 fan bases in the league see it. But I can't help but feel as if the story from last night, and it sucks because I would have much rather lost with Halliburton on the floor, and the story today could have been the Oklahoma City Thunder get over the hump, and they are the NBA champions for the first time in franchise history. I wish the storyline today was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the MVP, Conference Finals MVP, Finals MVP, scoring champion, the most points per game in a playoff series ever. I wish that that was what we were talking about today, but it just feels like the story is we were robbed of an unbelievable game 7. And Tyrese Halliburton going down 7 minutes into the game, I think genuinely was the worst case scenario for this game. I mean, obviously, if Shea would have, if a major injury like this happening, I guess I should say is it was worst case scenario, and the way that it happened, because Halliburton comes out and he's 3 of 4 from 3 in 7 minutes. He's talking his shit, and it just feels like it felt like Game 7 of against the Knicks last season. That's what it felt like, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, in the back of my mind, because I'm trying to put it off, I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, we're gonna do this. Tyrese Halliburton is going to have one of those games where he decides that we're winning and we're going to do this. And it's crazy. I mean, seriously, it is crazy how before that commercial break, I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, we're going to win the NBA championship. And that next commercial break, I'm sitting there heartbroken and completely distraught. And I mean, I've the only thing I could compare this to is Aaron Rodgers as a Jets fan was Aaron Rodgers going down on the 4th offensive snap of his New York Jets tenure. And I never thought I remember I mean I literally can tell you every single thing that I did that day. I can tell you what the weather was like. I can tell you what I was wearing. I can tell you everything about that day. It was the worst day of my life. It turned out to be the worst day of my entire life, and I never thought that it would ever get worse than that. And last night was 50 times worse than that experience. And I'm still not over it. It still really hurts. It's a lot of pain. And obviously, it's nothing compared to what Halliburton's going to. It's nothing compared to what the team itself was going through and that staff. But as a fan, it's just flat out. Yesterday was just the worst. I was thinking it was the worst day of my life. I truly do believe that. And, you know, it's just a big, massive what if that I don't know if I'll ever be able to get over in my entire life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's completely fair to start out with Halliburton and what happened. I mean, that's a pretty big storyline in this whole game. Um, you know, I've kind of struggled with it in the sense of, you know, I don't want to like overly celebrate this, but it is the NBA championship, but also like you don't want to win that way at all. Because you're right. It felt like, I mean, he came out, he had the best start of any finals game he had so far this series. And it was a close game at that point. I mean, obviously it was really early, but it was a close game at that point. It kind of felt like a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of runs each way. And it kind of felt like that's the way the game was going to play out, at least in that moment. We could go we could go hypotheticals and say how the game could have possibly played out if Halliburton was in the game. I think at the very least, and I think everybody can agree on this, the game would have played out differently with Halliburton in the game the entire game. Whether it was a close game throughout, or the Pacers go on a run themselves and take a big lead, or it could have been the same. You just never know with instances like this. But I think I can say with full confidence, and a lot of people can, that the game probably would have been different. Not saying the outcome would have been different, but the game would have played out differently. Yeah, it sucks. I can't even imagine. I mean, the images of him, down on the floor in the locker room after, I mean, they were heartbreaking. Truly, they were. Like, as much fun as it was to, enjoy that moment for my team, as a fan, it did suck, and it wasn't fun to watch that happen to him. It wasn't fun to feel like we got robbed of a great game. Like, I would have much rather have won an epic game 7, everybody healthy, than the way it played out, for sure. And I think most Thunder fans probably feel that way as well. So yeah, it's not fair. It sucks completely, and I wish it played out differently, for sure.
It's weird because, you know, I'm not one to say like, oh, there should be an asterisk on this championship. And I don't think there should be an asterisk on this championship at all. Um, I look back to, 2017 with the Astros. Should be an asterisk there. 2020 with the Lakers. I think there should be an asterisk there, not because I think that their title was less meaningful than anything, but it's worth noting that the circumstances were different. I don't think there should be an asterisk on this championship, but it will. I can imagine myself 15 years, 20 years from now, and it's the Thunder won the 2025 NBA championship, but you know, and not to take anything away from the Thunder, they were the best team all season long. It's one of the best defenses that I have been able to watch in my time as an NBA fan. Um, so not to take away anything from the Thunder, and they very well may have still won last night if Halliburton was playing. I I listen. This isn't worth a debate, but I just don't think I can be convinced that the Pacers were going to lose that game last night. I just saw the look in his eye. I just knew, and that's the worst part is if he'd come out started out 0 for 5 and that would have happened. It's still terrible at the end of the day, but it's not like wow. It looked like he was about to just go on a heater and win you an NBA championship, and as you get to sit there, I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't really remember much from the game. I don't really remember much from the game. It was seriously, it was similar to when Rodgers went down, and it's I remember bits and pieces of the game. I can I remember the Nimhard step back three, and that McConnell third quarter, and things start becoming clear there towards the end of the game. But that first half, I don't really remember much. I was in complete and utter shock, and I think a lot of basketball fans were. I think every Pacer fan was. And then it starts kind of setting in of, this is Achilles. He's not going to play next season. So there's no, oh, we'll run it back next year and be fine. It's now, like, this team was the favorite to make it out of the East again next season. They were the favorite going into this game, and by about the third or fourth quarter, their odds dropped to fifth best. And not that that's the end all be all, but it's a great representation kind of where this team is it looked like the future was set. The window was open for the next 3 to 4 years. You're going to go in the luxury tax to extend your homegrown franchise player in Miles Turner. And everything was, I mean, the future was looking great, and now it's cloudy. And, when Halliburton comes back in 2027, Siakam's going to be 33, 34 years old. Will Miles Turner even be on the team roster by then? There's no telling what's going to happen to free agency. There's so many questions now that this has generated. And listen, the Pacers fans that are saying, "Oh, the window's shut," come on. Like if I'm the one saying relax, then we have completely lost the plot. The window is not shut. The future is just a little bit cloudier now. Um, I don't want to dwell on this too much longer because I don't want this whole thing to just be a feel bad for Pacer fans. Um, but before we move on, unless you have anything else to say about this.
I mean, I was just gonna segue into possible next year for Indiana. As I mean, felt like we were getting. I'll say this: I don't want. Okay, I don't want this to sound like consolation prize or anything like that. But when Halliburton went down, I was not comfortable. Like I wasn't like. Obviously, I wasn't celebrating or anything, but I was not comfortable about that game either. And the Pacers went into halftime with a 1 point lead. So like look, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to replace Halliburton for this next year. That's not going to happen. But, and it's something we kind of talked about in this series too, the Pacers didn't need Halliburton to score 25, 30 points to win games. They're not going to need somebody to bring in somebody. Yes, there's a lot of question marks. Miles Turner, the biggest one probably heading into this next year, about what to do for next year. Do you want to be in the tax? The way I see it is this is still for sure a playoff team as is right now, especially if you bring back Miles Turner. I think there's a world where you bring in now I don't know who's available. I haven't looked too much into it, but there's a world where you bring in a serviceable point guard who can facilitate, who fits the style of play. Again, it's not going to replace Halliburton or what he is and how he, is the engine that runs that team, but I think you can still see a very competitive Indiana Pacers team who makes the playoffs, and at that point, anything can happen with the way they play and just their culture that they have there. So I don't think it's different next year, but I don't think next year is completely lost either. If you don't want to have it be lost as the Pacers organization.
I think the only reason it could be considered lost is because you're looking at this roster and you're thinking, okay, worst case scenario, you lose in a game seven, sucks because the finals are not guaranteed. It's very hard to get to the NBA finals. I think that was proven this year more than anything, how hard it is to get to the finals. And even when you do, on the very last day of the season, one ball can bounce the wrong way and you get nothing. And so I think the reason that that season is so lost is you were looking at worst case scenario, you lose. Okay, you've got the same team running back. Now you've got Halliburton out for the year. The thing with Halliburton being out for the year, the reason I think it's such a massive deal and changes everything is because the system, like the offense was Halliburton. And I think, we talked about it going into game seven. The game sevens are sloppy anyways as it is. But that third quarter and I mean, the Thunder, I think they scored, 18 points off turnovers in the third quarter? That doesn't happen with Halliburton. That's not going to happen with Halliburton on the floor. That's my concern is I saw how much the offense changed when Halliburton was off, and became a lot of iso ball, and it just looked confusing and janky, and you know, it's just I don't know it's just confusing, and I don't know where you go from here. Um, I don't think you blow it up by any means, and I don't think that they will. Um, I don't know what they do with Miles Turner. I think that's the first decision. Um, and you're kind of probably going to make your decisions based on that. I could see someone being an odd man out. I could see Obi Toppin being traded and them saying, okay, let's just get as many minutes as we can for Matherin and Jarris Walker as possible. Maybe Johnny Furphy gets some minutes and you just try and develop this young talent, not necessarily tank, but just kind of have a bridge year where you're trying to get these young guys experience and really prepare for that 2027 season. But I'll say this, and then I'll let you go because I don't want to hog the mic too much. But I do think that last night, I mean Tyrese Halliburton has already been he's already my favorite Pacer ever, and that kind of happened. I mean that happened this postseason. It really just be. I think he surpassed Danny Granger, who made me fall in love with the Pacers. Um, I think that last night he not only became my favorite basketball player ever, but I think he might have also become my favorite athlete ever. And I'll tell you why. He had tough conversations with this training staff prior to Game 6 and, being told probably that, hey, you can play, but it can go seriously wrong, and that's bad. And instead of sitting out, instead of taking the high road, he stuck it out, and he blew his freaking Achilles in hopes of winning a championship for my state, for the state that I was born and I was raised in, for the team that I have grown up watching and loving, for the teams that have broken my heart in 2013, 2014, 2018. You know, Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton risked everything. He risked his entire career for Indiana. And for that, he will always have my love, my appreciation, my respect. And, I'm wearing it now, this Halliburton jersey, but I plan on having it in the background of every single video that we ever do on this channel, or a Halliburton jersey everywhere I go, because I gained so much respect for him as an athlete and a person, and so many people on this Pacers team deserve that respect. But the way that Halliburton has carried himself the last week, um, I don't know if I can ever appreciate an athlete ever like that, as much as that ever.
Yeah, I do think that is a very key point that should not go undersold or should be forgotten about in all of this, is that, I think any fan base of any team would want their franchise guy to want to fight for something like that. Like you said, the conversations were had, the risks were fully understood, and this was one of them. And he still went out there trying to win an NBA championship for his team. I can understand people coming from the other side of it and saying, well, the risk of, a year lost or potentially more, hopefully he's able to get back to the same player that he was. And I presume he will. I don't want to jinx anything, knock on wood, but, he's going to a good surgeon who's done this before. He's done this with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant came back and he was still the prolific scorer that he was before. So, I have good faith that he'll be able to come back and be the player that he is, but also not guaranteed either. So, I do think that is a very important point to all of this, and I don't want that to get lost. It was more than admirable that he still went out there and played on this injury that, again, you can look back at history and see the correlation to calf strains and, calf injuries to what happened. Like, the risks were fully understood here, and he still went out and played. Yeah. I had another point, completely forgot what it was. So let's just go ahead, because I don't even remember what I was going to say.
Yeah, I hate just to bring the mood down like that, just because it was a very big night, very important night. A very important night for you last night. Seems like everyone in my life feels like I'm kind of the only one that's never experienced my team win a championship with my friends and family and all that. And you're the next one. You were kind of the only one there with me. I mean, you kind of talked about the feeling a little bit, but like for you, I mean, when did this kind of become like? When did it become like real? Of like, oh my gosh, like this is actually happening right now.
Well, again, like I wasn't comfortable after the injury, and then the Pacers have the 1 point lead heading into half. Thunder go on that run to go up 20. I got comfortable. I won't lie. I got comfortable at that point. Shouldn't have, because I will forever have many nightmares of TJ McConnell almost ruining it all for me. And Mathurin, who had a great fourth quarter too, to really make it a game there at the end. So, in terms of them winning, I didn't know for sure until about that last minute, whenever, they were kind of going to the free throw line, kind of putting it away. I still don't know if it's all the way set in yet. I'll say this. This is why sports fans like commit so much to a team and go through the downs and go through the down years and stress themselves out to no end over playoff games when, maybe they shouldn't, but they want to, because all of this was worth it, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, I know people kind of maybe have like a different reaction to people who are like so into their teams or so into their players or different things like that. And I understand, it's not for everybody, but for the diehards, like, it's okay to be diehard fans for sports. Because you get memories, whether it's just for yourself or memories with other fans or memories with family members, whatever it is. Like this season with Oklahoma City are memories like that I'll remember forever. Not to be too corny or anything, but like, and I had nothing to do with it. I don't want to try and be like, I'm part of the team here or anything, but like watching this team all year, it's been a joy. Watching Shea this year was unbelievable, and people are going to say whatever they want to say now, but they're champions, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, unbelievable experience.
And you kind of talk about the game. No one. This is. I mean, seriously. Like this is the first time I'm really like actually taking a look at the box score. I knew Shea didn't have the best shooting night. No one really did. Um, for either side, really. No 30-point score here for the Thunder. This really was an ugly game, and we talked about that going in. This was not going to be appealing to the eye. This was not going to be a game that you wanted to watch. As far if you were looking for the beauties of the game of basketball, and Chet Holmgren, who has received so much criticism not only during this series but over the course of these entire playoffs, was one of them that made this game really ugly and roughed it up a little bit, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Um, he's so long and tall, but him being able to read a game and read a drive and stay on his feet, and I still think he lacks the strength and the ability to keep a defender in front and things like that. But I think that's gonna come, and that's gonna just continue to develop. But when you finish with 5 blocks and you really just, I thought the Pacers were still getting to the paint at a decent level there, but Chet Holmgren really started honing it in a little bit, and I mean, he played the best defensive game that he's played all series long, maybe all postseason long, and as much criticism that he received during this postseason, I'm sure that felt really really good for him to come out and perform the way he did in Game 7.
Yeah, set a Game 7 record for blocks. He had 5 blocks in that game. The thing that always gets said about Chet from people around the organization is like how hard he works, and like he literally just thinks and does basketball. Like that's all he does. Whenever he was hurt, all he wanted to do was get back both times. After bad games, it's all he can think about, and he just wants to get back in the gym and work. So like the work ethic or anything like that has never been in question with him. So it was very cool to see that. Shea had it wasn't an efficient shooting night. But, in a Game 7 of the NBA Finals, I think, and I don't think I'm saying anything, a hot take or anything here, but I think most fans would rather see their star player go out there and, unload the clip, do whatever it takes to win, rather than kind of shy away and maybe not shoot as much as they should or, whatever. I also think something from Shea that this night was his playmaking, which was, the best it's been all postseason, definitely the best it's been all finals. He had 12 assists. He did a good job of passing out of the double teams, much better than he did in Game 6, finding open shooters. More shots fell. The Thunder still didn't shoot tremendous from the outside, but they hit more than they had on the road games. So I think that was the biggest thing for me that I saw from Shea was his playmaking. Jalen Williams, rough start, but came around in the second half. It was those three, and there was some support. Cason Wallace hit a couple threes. Caruso hit a couple threes. And Caruso, I mean, I can't speak enough about what a winning basketball player he is. Some of the stat lines, you'll see, yeah, he had an impact on this game, but there's some games where it doesn't show up in the stat box, and he just has a huge impact on these games, and I don't think the Thunder get here without Caruso, truly. I think that was the biggest acquisition. I think Hartenstein was a big acquisition for the Thunder as well, but I don't think he was, the difference maker that a lot of us thought he was going to be in the postseason, particularly. I still love heart, and I think he plays incredibly hard. And kind of a wrinkle with Hartenstein though was his playmaking that I wasn't expecting whenever he came over, which was so huge. But I think Caruso was a huge impact for Oklahoma City outside of the big three and what they did. Um, so yeah, it was a gritty performance. It was a sloppy performance. They got up. Pacers. I was talking to some of the guys that I was watching. We were kind of watching the game together. Jose, Adam, our boys from here, and I was like, the longer this goes, the more desperate the Pacers are going to get, and they're going to throw the best punch that they possibly can, and they did. And the Thunder did a good job responding, and that was kind of the game.
It was really weird. Now that you bring up Caruso, one of the first things that I thought of when this game went final was the Giddy Caruso trade, because that was just a straight up trade. That was one of one trade, right?
Yes, it was no picks. It was just
So I
Giddy
mean,
for Caruso. Yep.
that was literally one of the first things that I thought of when this game went final was kind of the little moves like that. That you don't expect to make such a big impact. And, do they still win a championship with Josh Giddey there? I mean, yeah, probably. But you don't have that type of player like Caruso. Caruso and Giddey are, two different players. And it's interesting to me just kind of how important every move that a team makes is, from bringing in Hartenstein this offseason to be a backup for Chet and then end up being a starter in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. To make a move off of Giddey and bring in Alex Caruso, who was one of the first guys off the bench all series long and played phenomenal defense. Um, uh, you can look at the way that this Thunder team was built, and you could write books about it. From the Paul George trade, which really got this underway, drafting Jalen Williams at 12. You get Chet. That was the same draft, Chet Holmgren at 2, right? So I
Same
mean,
draft.
you look at that. You look at the other draft picks that I mean, how the Caruso and Hartenstein are the only two guys here that were I consider Shea Gilgeous-Alexander homegrown. I know that
Yeah.
he started out with the Clippers, but I consider him to be a homegrown player. This Thunder team was built in such a way that I don't know if teams can even replicate. I don't even think you can say, "Oh, this is the new way to build a team," because I just don't know if this can be replicated in a successful way.
Yeah, and that's kind of the one last point I want to make on my Oklahoma City Thunder soapbox here is just the job that Sam Presti did. There's a lot of people that recognize him as one of the best executives in sports, but there was a lot of people that still had questions because he never built a team that won a championship. I always thought that was a little ridiculous because he always put the best teams out there that he possibly could. Just was never able to get the job done. But now he has a championship under his belt, and I think universally he should be considered one of the best sports executives out there right now. But yeah, it's this is a blueprint, but the key to this blueprint is hitting on your draft picks and developing your players. I think that's a lot of it is Oklahoma City's player development, which that yes, they drafted well, but the way they've developed players too. You think about, Lou Dort was undrafted, Kenrich Williams was undrafted, Isaiah Joe, who got released from the 76ers, they signed him afterwards. And then their second round draft picks, Aaron Wiggins, who went in the second round. There's others that I'm blanking on right now, but I think their player development and their drafting is really why this has worked and why it works so quickly. So yeah, it's a good blueprint to follow in terms of trying to rebuild quickly and get your team to a sustainably successful point to where it's not just 1 year and done. It's we have a chance to really make a run for a couple of years. So yeah, shout out Sam Presti. Who has been my GOAT for a while, but yeah, just an unbelievable team building, unbelievable player development, and it's very cool to see.
Because even when you're building this team and you're developing these players, it all still has to line up. You still have to get these guys, especially with the second apron now, it all has to line up at the same time. And I still think the Thunder are probably ahead of schedule, um, all things considered. If I think if you'd have told this Thunder team even 2 years ago, hey, you'd be NBA champs in 2025, I think that would be a shock to a lot of fans. They were a play-in team that season, so I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. So I think all things considered, they are um, very ahead of schedule. They're by far the favorites to be NBA champions next season, in my eyes, especially, with how the Eastern Conference is looking. We'll get into that in a moment, but I don't think there's a better way to bridge into this than going from Oklahoma City Thunder winning their first NBA championship and turning that into the next segment of Kevin Durant traded to the Houston Rockets. Obviously it wasn't. I mean, no, it wasn't the news of the day. It was the NBA Finals. A trade like that happening the day of Game 7 of the NBA Finals is uh, kind of bogus. And I remember I saw it as I was getting back. I went on a nice walk. Uh, you know, do on a Sunday, trying to clear my head a little bit. And yeah, I saw this and I thought, well, come on now, come on. Uh, Kevin Durant traded to the Houston Rockets for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the 10th overall draft pick this season. Um, Look like there's going to be some second rounders as well over the next few years. Early thoughts on this trade?
Huge win for Houston. I think when we were talking about this and trying to put together a trade for Houston to get Kevin Durant, we were sure that two of the four
Yep.
of Şengün, Thompson, Jalen Green, or Jabari Smith Jr. were going to go. At least two of the four, and only one of the four go. And you can make an argument about Dylan Brooks about what you lose, and I do think you lose some defensive intensity and some defensive edge on that team. But I think you can replace that, not easily, but you can replace that on the team, and maybe you have somebody on there that you like that you feel like can replace that already. So the fact that it was just Jalen Green, who, look, he's still young, but I think there's still a lot to be desired with Jalen Green, especially how highly touted of a prospect he was and the contract he was on. The fact, that he goes, I think, is also a win for Houston. The 10th pick, which could be something for sure. I'm not going to undersell what the 10th pick could be in the NBA draft. But does Houston need the number 10 pick in the draft right now? They were just the second seed in the West. Probably not. And then 5 second rounders, which, are whatever in the NBA draft. Don't want to undersell second round draft picks either, but you can easily recoup second rounders if you really want to. So yeah, initial thoughts, and even right after it happened, and even still now, is this was a huge win for Houston.
I tell you what, I'm buying a lot of Jalen Green coin these last 24 hours. I'm stocking up. I already had a lot of Jalen Green coin. I had a lot of stock in him. I believe in him. He had the best 3-point shooting season this past year. He shot 35% from that range, and that was averaging 8 threes per game. I think that, 4 years into the league, you can build on this. He averaged 21 a game this past season. He played in all 82 games. He started every single one of them. The past 2 seasons, he played 76 the year before that. I think that people are writing Jalen Green off a bit too early. Did he struggle in the postseason? Sure. Is he coming off a really good year? Maybe not a really good year. Is he coming off a year where I'm Phoenix and I'm saying, okay, let's see if he can learn how to play with Devin Booker, and 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 just kind of see where it goes. Houston was the number 2 overall seed this past season. So there's obviously something there with Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks both, and whoever you get at the number 10 pick, I would assume they go Malawach or Derek Queen at 10 if either of them are available. I think maybe a sneaky pick there, Ryan Kalkbrenner, I don't think he's going to go 10. I don't think you can in good conscience draft him at 10, but a pretty good post defender I think would fit in really nicely here in Phoenix. Would love to do a draft to do some draft talk later down the line, but I do think that Houston definitely won this trade just by only having to move off of Green, Dylan Brooks, and then that 10th overall pick. You got to keep Reed Shepard, you got to keep Cam Whitmore, you got to keep Jabari Smith, Alperen Sengun, um, and Amon Thompson, and you get Kevin Durant. So this is an absolute grand slam for the Houston Rockets. Um, I think Phoenix did a little bit better than what some people are saying, though.
Yeah, I think the price that they thought they were going to get originally for Kevin Durant was a little bit, they overestimated a little bit for sure. And look, I don't want to completely write off Jalen Green either, especially whenever you have two teams in the NBA Finals that were led by guys that were traded early in their careers, and Jalen Green's a little bit further in his career at this point than Halliburton and Shea were, but there's still plenty of room. And yes, he has all the tools to be a guy in this league. I think it's just can he put it together? Now the early reports of Phoenix, possibly looking to reroute Jalen Green and move him somewhere else. That doesn't have me all too excited about him either.
Right.
But we'll see. Maybe he sticks, or wherever he goes. Maybe he finds a good home and is able to develop to what we've all kind of expected him to turn into. As for Kevin Durant and the Rockets, like I said, I think this was a huge win for the Rockets. I think it's a huge win for Kevin Durant too. I think this was the best place for him to go. It turned into really a two-team race with Houston and Miami. I think if he went to Miami, there wasn't going to be much of a roster there. They could have built something around it, but I don't think there was going to be much there for Miami to be competitive, even in a wide-open East. They probably would have made the playoffs, but I don't know how far they get. San Antonio, it seemed like, they never really wanted to get too serious with it. Didn't want to give up many of their assets that they had, which I don't blame them at all. I think that was the absolute correct move to just kind of stay where they are and continue building the way they have, because I think they've done a tremendous job of building around Wemby. So I think Houston was the best place for KD. They get a surefire number one option. I know Kevin Durant's old, and I know he's been hurt through the past couple of years, but he can still go out there and score. He's the greatest scorer I've ever watched. Personally, I think he's the greatest scorer of all time. I think that's still in there for sure. They're working on a Fred VanVleet extension. If they get that done, you've got another guy that he has the ability to create. He's not as prolific as a creator. And then Sengun down low. I can go on and on about their pieces. Thompson, Tari Eason. There's so much there. They were already the number 2 seed. So, yeah, I think a home run for Houston and a home run for Kevin Durant.
And, I mean, I think Reed Shepard starting at shooting guard is going to be pretty fun. I don't listen, I hate Kentucky just as much as the next guy, but watching Reed Shepard and Rob Dillingham at Kentucky, I mean, they were enjoyable to watch. Rob Dillingham now with the Timberwolves. It was discussed that maybe he was going to be involved in a trade if Kevin Durant ended up in Minnesota. What you said about the Spurs is kind of how I felt about Miami. It felt like they were never really serious in all of this, and they just really wanted to get their fan bases. They made it. It felt like they made it. Excuse me. Let me try that again. I haven't been able to get sentences out all day, dude. It's been actually crazy. Like this injury has like actually fucked me up. It feels like they were just kind of acting like they were in it to show their fan base that they're still trying to win. In hindsight, I don't think there's a plan at all in Miami. I think it's an absolute disaster in South Beach right now. You've got Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. Khalil Ware is a piece of the future. He was untouchable in this trade, but like guys like Haywood Highsmith and Jaime Jaquez being untouchable in a trade for Kevin Durant, who, like you said, is probably the greatest scorer to ever pick up a basketball. That's unbelievable. That's not serious. You were never serious. And I'm not saying Miami should have traded for him. I think that probably would have made things even more of a mess. Um, because it's just okay, we have him for 1 year, 2 years, and you weren't going to do anything with that, like you said, even in a broken East. Um, I thought that San Antonio was going to end up getting it done, but again, like you said, maybe they weren't as serious as it was being made out to be. Um, so KD going to Houston, who he wanted to go to last season, but Phoenix wouldn't move him. He's now here where he's at. I think that this is a lineup that is still far off from Oklahoma City. Um, I don't think they have the depth, but there's potential because listen, you think I have stock? I have stock in Jalen Green, but I've got some nice stock in Cam Whitmore as well. It's who I wanted the Pacers to draft. They ended up with Jarius Walker, who I'm happy with, but I really wanted Cam Whitmore. That was the guy I wanted. If he can take a noticeable leap, if Tari Eason can take a leap, if Reed Shepard can be a serviceable shooting guard for you and you can get him in the starting lineup, if Jabari Smith can be good off the bench, if Steven Adams can just be a decent backup center, I mean, you're not far off at all from being the number 2 overall seed again and maybe going to the Western Conference Finals and having a date with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And what a story that would be for Kevin Durant versus the Oklahoma City Thunder in the Western Conference Finals. So I think that there's a lot of storylines coming out of the Western Conference, and there's going to be a lot of teams that I'm interested in the Western Conference. San Antonio Spurs are up there. Houston Rockets are now, they were going to be up there anyways, but they are certainly up there now. I hate to talk about this the day after the NBA Finals, but man, I think we are in store. It's going to be weird watching basketball from kind of a different point of view because the last 2 seasons it's been okay, Pacers, hey, here we go. Now this season it's kind of like, all right, let's see what's going on elsewhere because Pacers are not going to be what they have been. So Houston is definitely a team that I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on this season. I think they've got some really nice pieces. Again, I think they're far off from Oklahoma City. You need some things to happen, but they definitely have gotten better through this trade.
Yeah, I think as it stands right now with everybody's rosters the way they are as it stands, Houston is the number 1 threat to Oklahoma City in the West. Especially if, as you said, they can have some of those younger guys take a couple of steps forward offensively. Now I think you really have a real shot at beating them. A couple things worry me about Houston, though. Number one being, I mean, you have to think Denver's going to make some moves here to put a basketball team around Jokic. That makes them a contender if they have a basketball team around Jokic. You also have to think the Lakers aren't going to sit by. They're going to at least grab a center. We'll see who it is and how good that makes them. Golden State is an intriguing team to look at too. There's some teams out in the West that are probably going to try and make some moves as well. A lot of people are talking about East teams trying to make moves and trying because of how open it is now. But I think there's going to be some West teams that feel like they have a pretty good shot here as well and try and make some moves. The other thing that worries me about Houston is, and it's not a guarantee, but people are already talking about them grabbing another star, and it could be an instance of where maybe they do feel like they're not completely up to Oklahoma City right now, like you said, and at how cheap they got Kevin Durant, they're like, well, we still got these other pieces that we were going to be okay with moving for Kevin Durant. Let's just ship 2 of them or 1 of them and some other things out for another star. Depending on who it is and depending on what they give up, again, sticking with the theme of kind of this new era of NBA, it feels like we're getting into. The 2 teams in the NBA Finals had the best depth out of anybody in the league. I'm nervous, if it's true, it's just rumors. We don't know if they're actually looking to, get another star or make another big trade or whatever, but it's been rumored. If they're looking to do this and they ship off a decent amount of depth for another star, we could potentially be looking at a Phoenix all over again for Kevin Durant or, something like that to where it's like, dang, they were really close, but they sold out for, another big 3 or whatever you want to call it, and now we're nowhere where we used to be. Again, that's just kind of speculation at this point, just rumors, but I'd rather them not see that. I think maybe a couple moves depth wise and defensively wise, but man, I think they're really good as is, and especially if they can get some of their young guys to take a couple steps.
I think that that's a really big part, and a couple of things what you just said there. Um, one, I think you're totally right about the depth part of this. Um, I also think you're right about being able to make a trade, and I don't even think it needs to happen this during the off season. I think that once the season starts, things are going to open up, stars are going to become available, and if you've got a Jabari Smith in your back pocket, you know, um, that makes things a lot more interesting. If you want to go and get another guy, I don't think they should, because I think, like you said with Phoenix, what happened there, I thought a really big part was, you know, first of all, Bradley Beal was not the player that we thought that he was in Washington, where he could just go and be whatever he wanted to be, and it was the Washington Wizards, so no one really cared. You just probably, I can't imagine a lot of the people that were talking that highly of Bradley Beal that were non-Wizards fans probably did not watch a lot of Wizards games. They probably looked at the box score and said, "Oh, Bradley Beal, here's 26 points." I mean, yeah, how many players could you put on the Washington Wizards and they'd go average 30 points a game? There's probably a good amount of players that could go and do that. I think when you plug Kevin Durant on this team, it's totally different than Phoenix because he's playing with such a young roster. And plus Fred VanVleet there, who's a very experienced point guard. I think he's a very underrated point guard. I think he was phenomenal in Toronto. I think he maybe even been even better in Houston. Um, when you're plugging him in here, Kevin Durant doesn't have to go and be the guy. He doesn't have to be the guy. He can be the guy. He's allowed to go and go score the ball. And he's allowed to be Kevin Durant, but he doesn't have to be. And I think that's where you're going to see him at his best. That's where you've seen him at his best in his career. When he won 2 championships with Golden State, he didn't have to go in every single night and be the best player on the floor. If he had a bad night, you've got Amin Thompson, who's turning into a really good player. You've got Alperen Sengun, who I think the sky is the absolute limit for Sengun as a player. I don't even think that the ceiling for Sengun has been discussed enough yet. I think he could be just an absolutely disgusting player. Um, you've got a really nice facilitator in Fred VanVleet and this offense that can run this offense. So I think Kevin Durant is going to find playing with a young team like this. I really think the stars are going to align for this team. If they could stay healthy, if they can go I don't think you need to make a trade. I think you need to go add some depth in free agency. And I think you're fine. That brings me to my question for you. This roster, the starting lineup feels solidified in 4 positions. I think Fred VanVleet, Amin Thompson, Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun. You're solidified. You're good. The one question mark and uncertainty is Reed Shepard. How confident are you that Reed Shepard can be the starting shooting guard on this team?
I was a big fan of Reed Shepard coming out of Kentucky. I think you remember me really wanting him to go to Oklahoma
I
City.
do. I do.
Um, and the thing with Kentucky guards, like it's not just a thing. Like there's a proven track record at this point of how many have hit and how many have been so good. It's not a guarantee, but like you have pretty good chances if you draft a Kentucky guard. I think I think it's obviously in there. The shooting prowess that he had at Kentucky was very good. That's all he really needs to be now, is to be an outside shooter, a threat on the floor from three with Kevin Durant, with Van Vliet, with Şengün, guys that can create for themselves. Just be a threat from the corner, be a threat from the wing. There doesn't have to be a whole lot of off the dribble. Now he could add that to his game for sure, but as it stands right now, like he just needs to be a catch and shoot three guy, which I think he's more than capable of doing. So yeah, I think Reed Shepard can really fill into this role very nicely as long as he understands that role, which I mean I don't think he'll have a problem doing. But yeah, I've been a big Reed Shepard believer. I was surprised at how bad it went for him straight. And look, rookies are going to struggle out of the gate. Probably should have expected that. I thought he was just going to come out and kind of light it up. So I was a little surprised at how poorly things got started, and he didn't get a whole lot of chances either. But yeah, I have a lot of faith in Reed Shepard.
One of the weird things about Reed Shepard, or not weird, I guess, but one of the more underrated talking points about Reed Shepard is his defense. He wasn't a great. He was not a okay. That's even an understatement. He was not a good on-ball defender at all in college, but he could disrupt an offensive possession. He got in passing lanes really well off the ball. He was, I mean, he was one of the better off-ball defenders in the country. It was one of the strangest things ever. He couldn't defend the ball, but off the ball, he was phenomenal. I think that's going to be interesting. If maybe the Rockets want to get out and be disruptors and get out and run it a little bit. You've got you've got some really good scorers on this team now. When you add Kevin Durant, of course. Um, Again, Ahmed Thompson's going to take leaps. Alperen Sengun's an unbelievable player, so I think you're going to have an offense that can compete with this West that's going to be loaded, top to bottom. You know, you mentioned the Western Conference and teams making moves there, but you also talked about the East. And I think teams thought it going into last night anyways, but leaving last night and Halliburton goes down, you've now got Halliburton out. You've got Jason Tatum out for the year. I think those were going to be your two favorites going into next season out of the Eastern Conference. I mean, talk about wide open. I mean, what's stopping teams from putting their chips in and saying, okay, let's go do it this year when we can.
There's nothing stopping them. We already saw Orlando make a move. Now, obviously, that was before everything that had happened, but I'm sure they're not done yet. Especially now, you got teams that were kind of lower in the standings. You got teams like Detroit who had a really good year, who can add here and really take a step forward too. You've got I hate to bring them up, but you got teams like the 76ers who all of a sudden you look at it and go, okay, what? Hey, what now? Maybe we
Right.
stay healthy. Now we can do it. You got teams like the Cavs who become pretty interesting now in terms of, like there was question marks about them, but now let's just run it back.
You absolutely have to run it back.
Why
Yeah.
why not do this now? You've got Giannis and the Bucks, who it feels like nothing's gonna happen there. They could be like, all right, let's get something around Giannis here. We can do it. Like all these teams now are thinking, this is the year we can do this year. So yeah, I think you're going to see more movement in the East of teams trying to do something. I still think there's going to be a decent amount of movement in the West, but yeah, the East is open, and there's going to be a lot of teams trying to jockey for position here in the offseason.
And I think you mentioned the Bucks, and I think that Milwaukee should look at this as like a second life that they're getting here with Giannis running it back with them. I mean, you absolutely have to do everything in your power to put the best team that you possibly can put around him. Um, you know, you were bounced round one last season by the eventual NBA runner-up. I there when you have a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is a top 5 player, he's top 3 MVP voting, but I think he's a consensus top 5 player. I don't really think there's an argument there. Um, why would you not go and try and just be the best team you can be every single year? And I understand that that's, you know, that's just an obvious statement to make, but I think they sold themselves short with the roster this past season. When you go and you get Kyle Kuzma as your second option, you know, there wasn't a lot there to fear. Um, so why not go and make these and make moves to win now? Damian Lillard, who is there, but it's so forgettable that he's there because he hasn't played, and when he has played, it's kind of been forgettable at times during his Milwaukee stint. Um, he's going to be out for a good while now,
Yep.
probably the entire next season. So if you've got Giannis on your team and you don't know how long he's going to be there, because shoot, if they have a similar start to, I mean, how the Pacers started out, 10-15, if you have a start like that, I mean, we saw how they did when they had a good start. They fired their head coach.
Yeah.
If they have a bad start, I mean, Giannis could become available. And maybe that's when Houston comes back into play with Jabari Smith and all these guys. And I hate to go back to Houston, but anything can happen here with Giannis now. I mean, you're guaranteed. You're not guaranteed the next game with him at this point in time. So for me, if I'm a GM, if I'm the one making the decisions, I'm absolutely going all in this season to get to the NBA Finals because it's very likely now that it happens for Milwaukee. And I'm pushing my chips in the middle. And if it fails, then you know what? I think we were playing with house money anyways. We had a second life somehow, some way, when it seemed as if Giannis was absolutely going to leave no matter what. And if you fail, then you fail. But there's no way that I would be able to stomach as a Bucks fan if Milwaukee didn't just go all in this season to build around Giannis.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the consensus from Milwaukee to start the offseason anyway, is like, if Giannis isn't like in a hurry to be moved or doesn't really feel like he has to be moved, why would you trade him? Even before everything happened, like I think if you have Giannis, and I won't say you have a chance because you still have to put something around him, and we've seen that for the past couple of years now since they've won the championship. But like if you have Giannis and pieces around him, you've got a chance because of how good he is. So yeah, I think absolutely especially now, you keep him, try and put everything you can into the roster with as I don't know what their limitations are. I don't know what their contracts are, but as much as you can, build around it and see what can happen. You never know. Speaking of firing head coaches, I didn't even bring up the New York Knicks, who are in the Eastern Conference Finals. And we suspect them to make a move. They got to get a head coach first, which is still crazy to think about. That they fired their head coach. I don't think that was the issue at all. But roster moves probably going to happen for New York as well. So yeah, the East is going to. It's usually the Wild Wild West, but this offseason is probably going to be the Wild East.
I think something interesting about the Knicks is, I mean, I guess they look at this as a Mark Jackson to Steve Kerr type of adjustment where, yeah, you're really good and you're doing new things for our franchise that we haven't experienced in a really long time, but we think we can do more. And head coach still hasn't been decided on yet. Um, and I guess that's how they feel, but there's going to have to be changes to this New York Knicks roster. There's just going to have to be. The depth of this team, I don't even know if it's necessarily bad, and maybe it just wasn't used in the proper way. But I still think you need to build a little bit more depth on this team. And I don't think it starts by trading Karl Anthony Towns. Maybe you got to move a guy like Mikal Bridges if any team is looking to take on that contract. Um, Maybe you move a guy like Josh Hart. Maybe you move a guy like Mitchell Robinson to bring in more depth for this team. But um, yeah, I don't know. The Budenholzer firing. I would be willing to bet that there was probably more going on behind the scenes with that. There were probably people on the coaching staff, people in the front office that maybe necessarily didn't want him there. Maybe they thought they could go out and get a big fish like Ime Udoka, who he's going to be getting an extension in Houston. Um, maybe they thought they could get a big fish and they're just not getting it. Um, so I don't know what the thought process was there beyond maybe they think there's a ceiling that that was hit and under Tom Thibodeau, and I don't know, maybe they think they can shatter it. And I guess now with Tatum and Halliburton out, they're probably first or second favorite to make it out of the East now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, depending on what they do roster wise, and there's some good coaches out there still available. I think they're gonna kind of be in a rude awakening if they're expecting, just a coaching change to be what fixes it all. Because, like you said, there was some bench pieces there that they used in the postseason and it kind of provided a little bit of a spark, but I don't think there's much there. I feel like Tom Thibodeau is a good enough coach that if he saw talent on the bench, he'd probably utilize it at least a little bit. I understand he has a track record of playing starters a lot, and I'm not saying he just didn't use the bench because there was zero talent there, but if there was something there that helped them win games, I'm sure it would have been on the floor more than what it was.
Could I possibly interest you in some Orlando Magic coin?
Oh, I'm all in though. I'm all in. I think they're still about a move away, but yeah, I'm all in.
There still has to be some moves made here, but I mean, Desmond Bain, I think, instantly makes this team better. Franz Wagner, you still got him there. Paulo Banchero, you still got him there. Um, maybe Wendell Carter Jr. takes another leap, and Jonathan Isaac can come off and be a serviceable backup. I think you start Anthony Black at the 1, Bane at the 2. Um, but yeah, they're definitely still a move or two away. But I think this team, listen, I would not be surprised at all. And by the time that October rolls around, I could be even more in on this. But Orlando making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, it just it doesn't feel that far off to me. And a little bit more far off, but Orlando making it out of the East next season. I mean, it's June. It's June. I know these are conversations that are saved usually till dead periods like August with the NBA.
Sure.
Um, but I just wanted out on the record that I have tossed this idea of the Orlando Magic being in the Eastern Conference Final, or excuse me, being in the NBA Finals next season. Don't know if it's going to happen, and right now I definitely don't think it is. I don't think they're better than the Cavs. I don't think they're better than um, the Knicks. Probably still not better than the Celtics as things stand right now. But just I think Orlando's a team to keep an eye on through the offseason here, just to see what they do. I'll be paying attention. Similar to Houston, this is a team I'm going to have my eye on.
They absolutely are. And look, I'm not completely writing off Indiana or Boston, but there is like easily a world where in the Eastern Conference next year, I think it's safe to assume the Cavs probably have another pretty good year because it seems like they're probably going to kind of stay put. Um, but Orlando, Detroit being like top 4 seeds, which it wasn't crazy to think about before, but like both of them being up there now, and who knows where the rest of it shakes out. I still think easily Boston and Indiana are playoff teams next year, but I mean the East could be completely shaken up records and standing wise, which is kind of fun to think about. I think the West is definitely still the better conference, but I'm way more intrigued by the Eastern Conference now just because at this point it feels like anybody's game. There's a lot of shaking out to do. Boston's got some moves that they have to make. Detroit's probably going to do something. Feels like Orlando's going to do something else as well. Atlanta may get involved here. I think they're kind of interesting a little bit with Trae Young there, and Reese Shea, who had a decent rookie year, kind of quietly. So it feels like anybody's kind of game at this point within reason. There's some that obviously aren't there yet, but I'm very, very interested by the Eastern Conference.
Detroit is, I think, kind of the last team here from the Eastern Conference that I'm willing to talk about in June, the day after the NBA Finals. But okay, can I get some odds here on Cade Cunningham MVP? Can I get those odds? I mean, you got to look at the Eastern Conference next season. It's going to be down. Um, I mean, Cade Cunningham was 7th in scoring, 4th in assists per game. You're not going to have Tyrese Halliburton playing next season, so you're instantly probably up to 3rd, top 3 in assists per game in the league. If you can become a top 3 or 5 scorer, Pistons win 50 games. I mean, Cade Cunningham winning an MVP next season. Hey, I'm throwing out all the hot takes tonight. I'm making sure that everything is on the record. So if and when they happen, I had it first. But this Piston team is interesting. Jalen Duren's only going to get better. Tobias Harris is still a really consistent player. Asar Thompson's only going to get better. Ron Holland, year 2. Um, Malik Beasley off the bench, who either led the league in 3-pointers made or 3-point percentage. I think it was
I can't
3-pointer
remember.
made.
Unbelievable year though.
Right.
Big reason why they were very good. Yeah.
Correct. They really put together this team of misfit toys, and JB Bickerstaff, who exited Cleveland, and things were very bleak for him, and he went to Detroit and really redeemed himself as a coach. And this team looked really, really good last season, and they competed with the Knicks in the playoffs. I mean, they lost in 6, but I mean, there were a couple things that could have went differently, and that series goes to 7, and then you don't know what happens. Um, so I think this team is definitely ahead of schedule. Um, and I think a big, 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 big year coming from Cade Cunningham next season. He's going to solidify himself as one of the 3 or 5 probably best point guards in the NBA.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to forget, like, because of how hot like the Knicks got there in the playoffs. Like it wasn't a crazy pick to pick Detroit over the Knicks in that series heading into the playoffs. Like they were a very good team. Um, to kind of piggyback off what I was saying about the Eastern Conference standings, like Tatum's out, Halliburton's out. Brunson's going to be very good, but kind of again piggybacking off what you said too. Like it's not crazy to think Paulo Banchero and Cade Cunningham are going to be like the leading forces in the Eastern Conference throughout the regular season, which then in turn leads to Orlando and Detroit being like prominent forces in the Eastern Conference. Like it's not insane to think that. Paulo Banchero's been very good, very quietly. You've been on that for a while. And Cade Cunningham has been very good, kind of quietly as well. Made some noise last year, but yeah, like those two could be like the leading guys in the Eastern Conference very easily.
Listen, I threw out a I threw out a Detroit Orlando Eastern Conference Finals today in a group chat that I'm in with a Detroit fan actually. I did throw that out there this morning at about 11 o'clock when I was still in complete disbelief of what happened last night. But I'm glad. Listen, I'm glad you mentioned that Ben Caro. I think one of the least talked about number 1 overall picks ever. He's put up phenomenal numbers. Okay, one of the least talked about good number 1 overall picks ever. He has been phenomenal in his career. He's only going to get better, and I'm going to be watching and cheer. And Orlando's a team that I've really prayed doesn't match up with the Pacers in the playoffs because I want to continue cheering for them and I want to continue to like them because I really enjoy a lot of pieces on that team. I like Anthony Black a lot. I like Banchero a lot. I like Jonathan Isaac a lot. So this team is interesting. I'm gonna be watching this team very closely. This might be, the team that I'm rooting for the most outside of the Pacers. I'm gonna be honest. I'm very excited for what Orlando's gonna do. And then the uniform redesigns were sweet. It's
Very good.
awesome. It's gonna be appealing to watch Orlando Magic games next year. I don't know about the black. I'm still out on the black uniforms. I see what they were going for, but I think they should have just went all black.
Are those the ones that
But
are based off the warm-ups?
yeah,
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
yeah.
they were okay.
Like I get it, but I think it could have been better. Um, what a deep dive this has turned into. We we went from heartbreak to talking about a potential Pistons Magic Eastern Conference Finals next season. I mean, listen, if there were ratings conversations this past season, oh boy, oh boy. By the way, Game 7, most watched game in the NBA Finals in 6 years. I
Yeah, it
thought
did
that was a
very
pretty good
good.
cap.
Did very
I thought that was
good.
a pretty good cap for the conversations that were had leading into this series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, Listen, a lot of content coming your way. We're going to be diving into the baseball world a lot more if you're interested in that. Um, College athletics, maybe something that we haven't done a whole lot of on the channel here, but something we're maybe going to be
Hey,
diving into a little bit.
basketball possibly going to 4 quarters. I might be all the way in, baby. I might be all the way
Oh,
in.
come on. Come on.
I knew you'd hate it. I knew you'd hate that, but I've been wanting this for a while now. I'm sorry. I just think it would be better, personally.
I like to, yeah, better for the talking heads that get to put on commercials. Uh,
I
Listen,
think
I
I don't know.
am
I think the commercials will be more naturally built in. Like you're still gonna get a good amount of commercials, but I just think like you'll get more naturally built in commercial breaks, which then leads to like less breaking up of gameplay. I don't know. That's just me.
so then there's no. I don't think it's any different then if you have two halves where you're doing commercials every 4 minutes. You're having 4 minute breaks every. You're still gonna do that. You're gonna go to what? You're gonna go to 10-minute quarters. You're probably gonna do a break every 5 minutes, and I think they'll
I,
find their way. Listen, they
yeah,
cut
I
out
guess
the.
I guess I'm hopeful for them doing like one commercial break a quarter and then one in between quarters. Yeah, I know. Okay, two. I think two's a good number. They're probably not going to do it, but two commercial breaks a quarter, one in between quarters. I don't know. I feel like that's good.
think you would find yourself maybe more stoppage time there. It's not the
Maybe.
same.
I don't know.
Them cutting out them giving coaches a challenge at the end of halves, or
That's
them giving the coaches a challenge and cutting out the 2-minute stuff
right.
where you're going to the monitor
That'll be a big
every other
help.
play. That should be a big help. Listen, they're gonna find a way to get their commercials in one way or another.
Yeah, I guess that's
That's
true. That's just hopeful thinking from my part.
yeah.
I don't know. I get the media timeouts, and I don't know. I've never been like a huge fan of them.
No, I don't think no one is.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
just
no one
terrible.
is. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. It doesn't ruin the game for me, but like, it makes it a bit of a tougher watch, I guess.
Listen, I will say this. I will go on the record and say that I thoroughly enjoy college basketball more than NBA. And not a slight on the NBA. I just think college basketball is just it's the best. It is just the best. I would say the same for college football over NFL, but hopefully we
College
talk about
basketball
that
is
later.
definitely my favorite college sport to watch for sure.
Sure.
But
Sure.
yeah,
Um, I'm excited though. Some things are going to be things will be talked about on off the tracks. That's for sure. We've been talking for a while here. It's late. I got to get to bed early day at work tomorrow. Um, it's hot outside too. I mean,
it
my
is.
goodness. Um, but I'm enjoying this warm weather.
I'd rather be this hot than really cold.
I agree. I couldn't
So
agree more. Thank you guys so much for watching. I said it in the last video, kind of before Game 7. Thank you guys so much for kind of sticking with us here through this NBA season. I would love to do a video of going back and reacting to our preseason takes that we had in that one video.
yeah, I
Um,
do remember that. I feel like I had some decent ones. I don't
oh, I
remember.
think some of mine aged. I think some of mine aged. Listen, I was high on the Cavaliers, and I
You
was
were.
very
I
high
was
on.
not. I was not. I remember I was not. I thought that was a fluke start. I apologize. So yeah, I'll take a hit on that one.
Listen. So that's why I'm like, all right. I was high on the Cavs, and so you should listen to me when I talk about the Magic and the Pistons.
You're
That's
right.
just all I'm saying
I
for the
agree with
listener.
you on this one. I agree with you on this one.
So maybe we'll do that. Maybe some draft coverage. What
We're 2 days away. I gotta get into. I don't even know who I want the Thunder to pick this year.
Pacers don't even have a first round pick. They got rid of that. So I mean, I get to watch as an objective viewer. Watch Cooper Flag go. Listen, Cooper Flag won. Um, listen, I'm not sold on Dylan Harper going 2. I'm just not sold on it. I think the Spurs might get weird and go VJ or Conkanipple. I just don't know. Just a gut feeling on VJ at 2, and I don't know what it is, but I just can't get off of it. Um, maybe we'll do some draft code. Maybe we'll talk. I don't want to say anything, but we'll talk. We'll talk. We'll talk. Um, anything else before we get out of here? This has gone. This is the definition of off the tracks.
Yeah, we went. Yeah, like you said, to places that I didn't think we'd go, but I mean, we got such a quick turnaround. Like I said, draft in 2 days. Like we got to get ready here. So yeah,
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for following along. We appreciate it. But don't go anywhere because we're just getting started here on OTT, baby. You know me. It's off the tracks. Peace.